why is banking as a service so hot right now?
Yeah, that's completely true. Every company is striving to become a fintech company.
I think the demand for instant gratification is because we live in a digital world today.
Hello and welcome to episode number 12. How did I possibly miss episode 11? Hey, who can know? Of 11FS Spotlight. I hope you guys are well. In this weekly show, we shine spotlight on the best and the brightest in the tech and financial services landscape to try and understand what gets them going, what gets them growing, and what they really think the future of the industry is going to be like. If you caught it at the beginning of this episode as well, we've launched a few interesting things lately. We've just released the final episode of our new documentary, this series about banking as a service. So if you want to catch that last episode, but all the other subsequent, but all the other previous ones as well, head over to the 11FS YouTube channel and subscribe today. We've also just launched MLB. Now, MLB isn't just a hard to remember acronym. It stands for Minimum Lovable Brands, the 11FS approach to creating modern, iterative brands to help cut through the noise and create genuine connections with customers and their culture. Brand really is everything in this digital first world, and we really need to get that right for you guys and help you make that happen. To learn a little bit more about Minimum Lovable Brand, head over to the this bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly/11FSMLB now. On today's show, we're going to be shining a spotlight on somebody who you've seen a couple of times before, but I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Nick Ogden. Nick is one of Europe's, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think we should say Europe, Nick, one of the world's leading entrepreneurs, having founded fintech heavyweights WorldPay, ClearBank, and most recently the cross-border liquidity network RTGS. Nick, how's it going?
It's going, mate. Great, mate. How are you? All set for Christmas?
Pretty much. I mean, I've got that sort of cheery, festive vibe that I think only can be solved by lots of port and cheese at this stage. So I'm looking forward to decompressing a little bit. But where are you? Are you back at home now? Yeah.
No, I'm back over in Jersey. I've made a mistake. I was going to get a tin of Adnams to drink while I was on this call with you. I'll wind you up a bit. That they've exported some of that to us kindly.
Norfolk Mafia, like I feel like at some point it'll all come out, won't it? But yeah,
not meant to advertise on this, but do try Adnams Ghost Ship. David and I both recommend it.
Absolutely, like anything Adnams, it's not just because it's local, but it's just because it's good. But all right, as you guys know, watching this show, it's always a big part of it in terms of your engagement and your involvement. So if you leave any questions that you have for myself or for Nick in the comments sidebar, we'll make sure that we wrap them up in the conversation as we go. As I sort of said at the top of this, Nick, I mean, we've spoken a few times, but for anybody who hasn't caught you before, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are?
Okay, I guess I've become a financial services or internet or e-commerce pest over the course of the last few years. I sort of, going back to the early days of the internet, I was involved with the Gang of Four setting that up in the UK, and still own business.co.uk, which was a domain that we sort of carved out back in 1994. We had an interesting situation. We set up the internet in the Channel Islands and became an ISP, a really bad ISP. And we were also doing work with Barclays, and we actually created the world's first interactive online shop, allowing real-time card transactions. This is back in October of 1994. And it's funny, I was doing a course with Cass Business School a couple of weeks ago. And I sort of posed the question to them is, what if I told you a piece of cable was now worth about $44 billion? And it was the piece of cable that we devised to link the X25 switch and the PC up to make it work. But so my background really is, I've always been a bit of a guy for trying to make things work in a different way. So that led to the creation of WorldPay, then on from that, did a load of stuff on cognitive services with voice biometrics, set up Cash Flows. Cash Flows was the pre-runner of Monzo and Starling. It was a digital bank supported by HSBC. Then set up ClearBank, and now doing RTGS Global, which is great fun. Just enjoying life.
Indeed, I mean, even in this period of time as well, right? We'll come back to RTGS in a minute, but what I always kind of find fascinating, and look, me and you've chatted quite a few times on this, and broader on things, but you've always sort of gone back to first principles, like you say, thinking about things a little bit differently, because it's interesting when so many people sort of lose the wood for the trees sometimes in terms of what the real problem is. I mean, how have you found that ability to sort of stand back and ask in all honesty, sometimes stand back and ask the silly question, which is like, why can't we do this better?
Yeah, I think it's, I quite like looking at markets, looking at the way things do, and just, as you say, see if you can do them better. E-commerce hadn't been done, so that was an easy do it better. You just do it first. But moving on from that, it's just looking at things and saying, why do we do it like that? Surely there's a more efficient way to do things. And you'll recall from when we talked earlier this year that I've got this buzz now about a thing called financial friction, which exists right the way through our industry. And it's all of the processes and things that we've designed to cause pain and grief to our customers. And, you could take it all the way back to the mainframe computer era and all the rest of it. Why did we invent this stuff? Well, we invented it to make things work faster. And the reality is, if you go back and look at how you exchange money today, it's still faster to hand somebody a £10 note, COVID rules notwithstanding, than it is essentially to send it to them electronically. And it's really looking at all of that and saying, okay, well, look, if we parked all of that and we forgot about what exists in the marketplace and we put a whiteboard on a wall and we started doing some scribbling, what would we do if we were trying to fix that problem today? And if you do that in isolation to the existing infrastructure or the existing market players or whatever, sometimes you can come up with interesting ways to change things. And I think that it's, anybody can come up with an idea of, say, let's do something faster or cheaper or with a different brand or a different color, which is great. I'm not knocking that at all. But I think that I've been fortunate to be able to come up with, how do we change something so it's sustainable? And if you can do that, then they tend to stay around. And I'm really, really fortunate that, I've moved on through many of the businesses that I founded, and every single one of them is still in existence. And that's not down to me setting it up. It's down to the fact that, A, there's a great team of people still working in all of them. But the market niche that we carved out when we set up the business still exists today. In the case of e-commerce, 25 years after we invented it. Yeah,
I mean, it is amazing, as you say. It's having a good idea is one thing, and actually, I mean, I've never found either a corporate or a startup that doesn't have the sort of kernel of a good idea. But actually creating a sustainable business around that idea that can continually make sure that it's moving forwards and evolving as well is a real a pretty amazing skill set. And I sort of I say this to people at 11FS a lot. It's anybody can sink a shot from the halfway line once, but being able to do it repeatedly is like a skill. And actually, you seem to be able to sort of conjure up lightning, which is amazing. I mean, it's interesting your point there about the ways in which things have been done as well. And I mean, if you look around, there's always kind of examples of that in the world, isn't there? It's where the system has been set up to almost slow down the process. I mean, the QWERTY keyboard that's in front of us all probably right now, was set up in a way to slow down the process of doing it. But now that we don't need to be slow, we want to be fast, then we have to challenge some of those beliefs and challenge some of those things. Not that I'm going to start changing keyboards, Nick. I don't think there's a great business in that just yet. But actually, it just shows that the world that was set up for a slow analog digitizing world, and we need those leaps to get further forward, don't we?
It's funny, you focus on keyboards. Back in 2007 when we were developing VoicePay, the rationale is that we all talk far better than we type. Some people say that we type 50 words a minute and all the rest of them. Hats off to them. I can't, all right, and lots of people can't, but we can all talk. And I think I've never told you this story before, but as parents, there's something that we do naturally with all of our kids. And that's for the first 2 years of their life, we teach them to walk and talk. And then for the next 16, teach them to shut up and sit down. That's a consequence of what we do. All right. But talking is natural. And the technology we've got today and the digital explosion we've experienced, I think, as a benefit of, if you could dare say that, of the COVID pandemic, means that, you can run a meeting, you can run it in Teams, you can record it, you can output all the conversations into a document, you can end up with all of your thoughts in a document, you can prune that down, And the way that you used to work in relation to got to book a meeting, got to go there, got to have a cup of coffee, got to visit Starbucks, got to stand up halfway through the meeting because I need to go to a loo. I've yet to have a Zoom or a Teams call where everybody's stood up and gone anywhere. All of that's changed. It's gone out of the window. So our ability to automate and change and use technology to really accelerate our development in relation to new technologies and new opportunities is probably as good now as it was when, you know, the commercial internet rocked up back in 95, 96.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the difference in the market today is that, and actually, I mean, we talked about this. Goodness me, I think it was last year, didn't we? When 11FS launched the 11 years documentary about what happened since the financial crisis. But I guess the difference today is that it feels like small players can take on gigantic giants in the market freer than ever before. You know, the internet really, and I know democratization, and, you know, it's something being democratized is like a bit of a buzzword to get sort of VC funding these days, but it does feel like the level playing ground that is brought about by being able to so efficiently scale capability through new technology. And really, if I look at you know, WorldPay and ClearBank and now RTGS, really, none of those things you've done with an aspiration of solving one problem in one geography, but very much you know, WorldPay, it's in the name, right? You know, it's like, and actually, you know, this is, you're always looking at things that affect the world, not just affect one geography.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's the trouble with having a frequent flyer card. You know, I remember once sort of at Heathrow, sort of going in and being greeted by somebody saying, "Oh, you know, do you know that you're one of our top 10 flyers?" And I didn't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, because there's a law of probability between that and planes falling out the sky, I guess. You know, I've just been very, very fortunate in my career, in my life, to be able to travel around the planet. And the reality is that most solutions you develop will work in a different market. They probably need suites. They're definitely going to need a different language. Yeah. You know, if the concept behind what you're trying to do works somewhere, it's very, very likely to be that you can replicate that elsewhere. You've still got the same problem, though, of finding the people to help you replicate it. Because, you know, my success is down to the teams of people that I managed to convince to agree with what I'm saying that we're going to try and do. And if you like, that's the knack of an entrepreneur, to convince people to go into the unknown, get them excited about it, and if you're lucky, it will work.
Do you know, I completely agree with that. I've often said, you know, any sort of modicum of success we've had from with 11FS is started with getting Jason, Ross, and Simon to agree to join us in the first place, and everything else has actually been relatively straightforward from them. But I guess part of that really is, it feels like it's not just innovation and, you know, alchemy. It's actually exploration to a certain degree. I mean, what you did with ClearBank, you know, the first clearing bank in 250 years, like, this had been done before, but just nobody thought about doing it again, which is crazy, isn't it, given all of the opportunities that come with that? And I guess we're seeing that increasingly now with, you know, challenger banks and everybody sort of doing different things. But to be the first, or to be the person who comes back to a good idea in the past and do it in a different way. I mean, I don't know where you at some point, you know, people, they sort of say the first startup is for money, and the second one is for kind of legacy. Like, what's the fifth one for, or sixth one for? What, like, why do you keep doing this? What's your motivation?
Like, that's, you sound just like my wife, darling. It's just good fun, you know. It honestly, and that sounds very, very coy, but it is true. I just really enjoy innovating. I enjoy, you know, the challenge of startup, and whatever. Actually, you know, here you go. I don't know if you can read that. Nobody cares more about startups than I do.
Nice.
And I got that from Luxembourg University. But anyway. And it's just good fun. It's good fun. But it's not without its challenges, because you know, from startup to scale up, depending on what you're doing, becomes really difficult. And you know, somebody once said to me, "What's the best advice I could give to somebody in a startup?" And I said, "Well, fire the first person who comes in and says that you need an org chart." And And the reason behind that is that when you've got a tight group of 10, 15, 20 people, you're all hunkered down, you're all trying to build the thing, you're all working towards the same goal. And actually your communication amongst that group is relatively controlled because you're all together. As that expands out, that's where the fractures start to occur. And that's where it gets tough to manage.
Yeah, it is difficult, isn't it? And I think it's interesting, particularly as I saw somebody posted something yesterday that sort of said, hire people you trust. But my view, I think you run out of those people very quickly when you're scaling an organization, right? Not that you don't trust people more broadly, but people you've worked with, who you've delivered something with, who you would want to work again. So you've almost got to hire people that they trust as well, haven't you? And that trusting other people's judgment and going with those things is part of building that sustainability in those teams, isn't it? But talk a little bit more about RTGS then, because this is the last thing. I mean, pandemic and everything aside, and we'll come back to that in a second. But RTGS is the thing that's taking up all of your time at the moment, right?
Yeah, and some. Basically, what we came up with an idea, a theory that actually, if we went back to basics and started to attach central bank liquidity to transactions, we could make the financial system safer. And one of the interesting things about that was that it meant that we had to talk to regulators, we had to talk to commercial banks, but we were really pushing a change, which I think the door was already open for in relation to financial stability. You know, we'd never had a challenge from any of the prudentially regulated banks we're talking to about sharing the data, their transactional data with the regulators. And never had a pushback from any regulator in relation to talking to them about putting RTGS Global into their country, which is quite interesting. But what we wanted to do was get to a point whereby every transaction was against guaranteed liquidity, which means that it can't fail. Yeah. That might sound strange, but if you then say, let's have that as a goal, then we want to do that really quickly. All right, because you can say, well, we can do a payment today, but it might take 2 days or whatever, but it's going to get there. Well, that's fine, but that 2 days is a financial friction cost to the business who's waiting for the payment or the person who's waiting for their money. So you need to get rid of that. And so we challenged our friends in Microsoft to say, within the Azure network, can we do something called atomic settlement, which is basically saying we need to flick a transaction and the ownership of the two components within that transaction in 50 milliseconds on a transaction between New York and Australia. And that's what we do. Yeah. We built that technology 18 months ago. Nobody else could have done that. And it's a consequence of working with the guys in Redmond and the guys in Europe that we've actually got to a point of engineering that. And getting to a point now where our technology is available within the Azure store, so it's as easy as adding a component to a Windows PC. And I think that was that journey and getting to that capability with technology was the first thing. What we're now doing is how do you deploy that and where do the benefits lie? And we've got extensive conversations going with over 50% of the world's leading banks in relation to how this technology can work for them. And it's not just about making faster payments, it's about reducing risk, it's increasing liquidity, it's impacting in treasury. And it's then going into the exchanges and saying, how can we do settlements and security settlements much more quickly? It's then going into a country that doesn't have an RTGS platform and saying, actually, if we drop ship this platform into you as a central bank, you will get a domestic payment scheme and access to a global RTGS network. And it's a range of different things. And every day somebody seems to come to us and say, what if, which is my favorite says, what if we wanted to do that with that? And we're just going through a whole I would call it's almost like thought leadership at the moment within our industry of what this can do. We talked to one of the big card schemes, I won't tell you who they are, and we said, look, what if the shopkeeper, and this, forget COVID for a second, just assume you go into a shop and you're actually allowed to use your card and pin it. I said, what if the moment that transaction was completed, that shopkeeper got his money? Wouldn't he be delighted? And we can do that today. We don't have to wait. We'd have to plan to do that. We can do that today. And it was, oh my God, that's going to change our business model. Reality is not going to change their business model. What it's going to do is improve the satisfaction and service they're delivering to their customers, potentially within the same economic environment that they operate in today.
Yeah, I think, as you say, that the certainty of those things, then it's you know, we're no longer in a batch world. You know, the internet, the world we live in is real time, isn't it? In everything that we really value. So, you know, back to my keyboard example, it's like we don't want to live in a world where we're artificially making things slower to deal with back-end systems. We want that immediacy, don't we?
One of the funniest requests, I think, the tech requests that are the funniest that we've had is, can we slow it down? You know, it's running too fast for our bank. You know, we need to slow it down. Why do you need to slow it down? Well, we don't know. We know we have all of these processes and manual processes and this, that, and the other. And you say, why? Oh, because that's what we built. Okay, that's great. We understand all of that. Don't knock it down, but you need to move from there to where the market's going to go to and where your customers are expecting you to be. You know, do a Google or a Bing search or whatever, it doesn't batch it and say, please wait 5 minutes and we'll come back. Done like that. And even now, you know, I'm on a gigabit link to you guys. You know, if you've got sort of very, very high speed network connections, even after a while, you get blasé and think that stuff's slow.
Yeah.
And yet, when we look at how we move money around and all the rest of it, it's just almost accepted that it's going to take time to get there. I think David has just disappeared. Okay, I don't know whether ladies and gentlemen of the audience, I don't know whether I'm expected to do a song at this stage or do a small dance for you or whatever. I'm certain he'll be back, because Norfolk has not disappeared off the planet, I don't think.
It was just at the point, Nick, where you were showing off about your fancy internet. I think my internet got jealous and dropped out there. Apologies for that.
Yeah, we were just speculating that you'd run into the kitchen, put a pound in the meter, David.
Well, you know what Norfolk's like. It is like that a little bit. But, so what stage are you at now with RTGS then? Because obviously, I mean, like you say, the impact of that is huge. You know, potentially, you know, connecting networks of networks of networks. You know, a country then becomes a network from this perspective. And actually, as you say, the regulators, the controls and the opportunities that the regulators have by partaking in that network as well is huge, isn't it? That has the potential to really rethink those underpinning pieces of financial services networks in each of these geos.
Well, we've got infrastructure operating in Japan, Australia, Singapore, Europe, obviously, UK, obviously, Canada, USA, and I've missed some places out. So the networks already, the operational live networks are already up and built in those locations, supporting a range of currencies. We also, those people who remember when I launched ClearBank, I was sort of berated for saying we're going to go slowly, and they say, look, Nick, you always go at the speed of light. What's all this about? But when you go to a position where you actually start to use people's money, actually I do think you need to go slowly to make sure it's working correctly. So we're just heading now into into 2021. We've got a working group of PwC and Microsoft who are working with us with some top global banks around the world to pull together a working group. We have a whole sandbox environment which we deploy to commercial banks, which allows them to set up a global infrastructure straight off their desktop to actually work out how all of this stuff works. So during the first 2 quarters of 2021, we're going to be extending that network out, doing virtual transactions, not with live currency. I don't believe in that time between the various different banks. You know, dollar, euro, all of the you know, yen, all of those currencies. With a view that then moving through into limited live currency transactions, starting in the first half of 2021, which is when we, if you remember back, which when we predicted that we would start to do that, and then ramp that up through towards the end of the year and into 2022. It's
amazing. I mean, if 2020 has shown us anything, getting different geographies agreeing on standards and rolling things out is somewhat sort of difficult, isn't it? But like getting people bought into this, I guess getting people bought into the vision is one thing, but getting them to really sort of implement it as well is another. And you sort of touched a little bit here, both from a technological perspective, but from the network perspective with the partnership with Microsoft. Can you sort of expand out a little bit more on that? Because obviously, you know, as you said, the technology to do this is pretty new, isn't it? So, you know, how are you guys working together?
Well, we got involved with Microsoft when we started to build ClearBank back in 2014. I think I've told you this story before, but it always gets a laugh, and that was the discussion with the regulators about where we were going to build ClearBank. I'm certain the question from them was, you know, where is the physical location going to be? And my response was, we're going to build it in the cloud. They looked out of the window to try and work out what the cloud was, because in 2014, the cloud was something quite not there. But we built, ClearBank was the first total cloud bank, which we built. And we worked very, very closely with the guys at Microsoft, but again, both in Europe and Redmond, in basically getting that built, and that relationship continues through today. When we got involved into how we do RTGS globally, it was a whole different can of worms. Although we built within ClearBank an ISO 222 access and API into the UK payments system, so you had one plugin and it did a lot. This was somewhat different because we needed speed and scale. You know, you need to do 30,000 transactions across 180 currency corridors in 50 milliseconds. And you can do the math on that, but it's a big number. And, you know, how do you do that? And then how do you reconcile all of that? How do you write all that to an immutable database? All right? How do you reconcile and store all the different FX rates that are occurring across all of that lot in real time and manage all of that? And so you end up with, you know, it's what starts with a very, very simple project becomes more and more complex. You know, how do you do future dated payments to allow banks to manage their liquidity and the regulators to see that liquidity in advance? How do you avoid getting into a situation that we had in 2007 and 2008, where you have a global financial crisis? Liquidity runs out. That's not my dog, so I don't know whose that is. When liquidity evaporates, and one of the guys at the Federal Reserve Bank in Washington DC, when we were talking to him about this, said, "Look, you know, had we had a system running like RTGS Global, it wouldn't have stopped the global financial crisis, but the impact of it would have been significantly less because we'd have known where the liquidity was."
Yeah.
So, it's pulling all of that lot together, getting the technology to work. And also having a partner, and they are a true partner, whereby we find, you know, things in their platform that we need to change, and they are happy to do that. And they come back to us and say, okay, fine, based upon what you've just said, we've made that change. But the consequence of that, because they've got like 400 people working in Redmond, is that actually we now think that if we do that as well, that will give you another change, which will improve speed. And it is really that close working relationship in relation to, you know, backwards and forwards on a very, very continual basis in relation to tweaking the network. The benefit of that is that hopefully some of the stuff that we're doing then cascades down within the Azure network. So other organizations who are within that environment pick up and get the benefits from it.
Yeah.
That edge security, a whole range of different aspects.
It's interesting when people often sort of talk about partnerships, they often just mean procurement, and I think banks are very guilty of this. They talk about partnering with somebody, but really what they mean is they've procured a thing. But actually, when you're working in a partnership like that, as you say, and people are pushing back in places and working together to kind of, it's about focus on that common objective, isn't it? And actually, that a lot of that comes down to sort of cultural alignment, doesn't it, in terms of being able to sort of have those strong relationships. But maybe, I mean, I know I think we could probably talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but I guess the thing to probably have a look back on is like, how's 2020 been for you? Obviously, everything with COVID doesn't seem to have slowed you guys down from a development perspective or from a rollout perspective or relationship perspective. So, I mean, how have you managed to sort of keep up the pace without being on a plane every other day?
Yeah, my tin of kerosene that I used to sniff every morning, long time finished. I think it's quite interesting, and none of us knew what to do when this event arrived, when the pandemic arrived. And all of us have had to learn how to make it up and sort it out and guess our way through the crisis. And I think that over the course of the last few months, certainly a number of the business I'm involved in, that it's now stabilized down. We now know what the new norm is. We've sorted all of this lot out. We're running a global startup. All right. Historically, that would have meant spending half of my life on an aeroplane. And the reason why you did that was because you had to have meetings. And there was an expectation that, if you're working with the big bank in Japan or in America, wherever, that you would go and see them. So you'd basically sort out a time, make a calendar appointment, jump on a plane, spend 10 hours or 12 hours or whatever it is flying somewhere, go to a hotel that was crappy, do whatever you're going to do, get up, have a bad breakfast, go to a meeting for a couple of hours, all right, and then fly back. Right, but that was what you did, and that was great, and everybody did it. So that was the norm, and that was fine. You don't need to do that. All right, what you need to do is you need to have a system whereby you plan and you set a Zoom or a Teams call up or whatever, and you say, right, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock because at 7 o'clock I've got a meeting in Japan. And you do your meeting in Japan and you have everybody there, and then you finish that, and then you say, okay, fine, at 11 o'clock actually now I've got a meeting in Singapore. And you do that, and then you move on to actually, in the afternoon, I've got a meeting in Dubai, or I've got a meeting in Austria or Switzerland or wherever, and you just work your way through. And you end up, you can basically do global meetings every day, all the time, and achieve as much out of that as you would ever have achieved in face-to-face meetings. And you save a ton of money, and you save a massive amount of time, and you actually increase your productivity, because at the end of the meeting, all right, when you're doing the traveling gig, it's okay, I will come back and see you, or will you come and see me? So you're immediately building in a delay to the whole of that sequence. On this, we just say, okay, fine, well, I'll pick up with you tomorrow morning. At what time can we have a call? Boom, on. It
is strange. It's in some ways, it's reduce people's expectations of needing to do that, and in other ways it's massively increased expectations of always being on, isn't it? I agree. I mean, I've spoke today to Dubai, Saudi, Denmark, and the US, and it's like that would have been a month's worth of things, and it's just not necessary anymore. I mean, that said, I'm also very sick of sitting in the same office, aren't you? And as somebody who travels quite a lot, I mean, being connected to the team, because it's an interesting one, isn't it? There's the camaraderie, the culture, and everything that you want from the office. But I think those international flights, those international views, I don't think that will have to happen anymore.
No, I think it's sad as well when you get to the point where a meeting is the most exciting thing, when the fact that the person on Teams, if they talk, they move around the screen or whatever, and you work out where they've gone to and who's still in the meeting. But that of course it doesn't happen in a real life meeting.
And not so much. I mean, if we could start doing that, almost sort of a musical chairs element to the physicality, I think that's an extra incentive to get back in the office, isn't it? But
if you go, you can plug in interactive whiteboards. You have whiteboards sharing everything that we used to do. All right, we can still do, but from my view, I can actually do it better and easily and more easily. And you go and share stuff off and whatever, and I think get efficient. I think. I'm not certain, people say to me, well, next year you'll be able to fly, and, I've done, as I was saying to you early on, I've done 35 days in quarantine this year. I'm trying to work out what criminal offense I could have committed to do. And the punishment associated with 35 days quarantine is I've had more cotton bud stuffed up my nose than I ever want ever in my life. I'm done with that. That's not happening anymore. But, things go on and you can move forward. And I do think, the new norm is here to stay, and that's going to give a massive acceleration. I think that, last year we were talking about, what's going to happen before 2030, and we're all, throwing darts and dartboard and guessing. I think that whatever I said that was going to happen in 2030 has been, left shifted by 5 years, because it can do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? In some ways, the whole world has accelerated, hasn't it? And actually, people's agenda from a digital transformation perspective has accelerated. It's been interesting to see the organizations who have been able to almost rapidly evolve in this period to kind of get there. But I mean, do you think though that we've always sort of seen, I mean, out of the financial crisis, out of the crisis that we're in now, you know, inevitably any downturn leads to, you know, entrepreneurs looking for an opportunity to turn that around. So do you think we're going to see an abundance of new organizations looking to sort of really leverage this? I don't just mean Zoom and, you know, different people in that space, but do you think there are going to be startups really taking advantage of this new, more virtual world?
I think that startups will be different. You know, and if you look at hospitality and retailing and all of in those areas that have been really massively impacted by the pandemic, you know, nobody's going to set up a retail shop without an online shop. Nobody's going to set up a shop without their own distribution and the ability to ship stuff out ever again, just on a just-in-case basis. You're not going to take the risk.
Yeah.
So the whole dynamic of that's going to change. You know, when you put a business plan together to go and raise finance, most venture capitalists or private equity groups, you know, where is your office? Well, actually, my office is in my bedroom. And, you know, and that's, you know, all of those cultural things, I think, are going to change. And I think that the cost of establishing a business, because of what we can now do, has come down dramatically, because you will not be incurring, unless you daft, a whole raft of infrastructural costs just to impress somebody.
Agree. Agree that the shiny office and shiny marble is no longer necessary for that, is it? It's all about what you do and you say, which is great, isn't it? Because that's where it really sort of makes a difference. But I guess for you guys, for RTGS and for everything that you're doing, what's the priorities for next year then? Is it more of the same, rolling out more, being, you know, getting live, working with more countries? What's the top priority?
It's just execution. And good customer service. You know, if we screw up on customer service, you know, like any business nowadays, and I think probably more so now because of the way that we work, you know, you're dead in the water. So we've got to be full on that. We've just managed to get an onboarding process for any bank in the world that requires them to answer just 5 questions, and we're really, really pleased about that. And it's again just trying to make slick processes and whatever. So it's that and listening to, you know, the various different challenges and questions that we get raised by our potential customers, and then working that within our advisory group. We've got a very strong advisory group to make sure that we are, you know, guessing at making the right decisions, if you're allowed to say that.
It is. I mean, it's fantastic to see it going so well, Nick. It's great to see it going from strength to strength, and look forward to seeing how it shapes out next year as well. But and hopefully at some point we might be able to get another beer or an Adnams at some point. That would be nice.
Wonderful.
All right, everybody. I'm afraid we're running out of time, so we're going to have to close out now. But thank you so much for everybody for joining us. Nick, thank you for coming on the show again. Where can people learn a little bit more about you and RTGS Global?
Well, LinkedIn or rtgs.global. That's the website domain. And listen, everybody, have a great Christmas. Stay safe, and I wish you all a prosperous and successful 2021.
Fantastic. That's all we have for you this week, I'm afraid, and actually, in fact, all we have for you this year. Have a great Christmas, everybody. As Nick says, it's been a long and weird one, hasn't it? But we hope you have a great break. Come back really refreshed for 2021. If you want to stay connected with all of the content that we put out, you want to see the other episodes of the show, make sure you give us a follow on LinkedIn, and don't forget, you can head over to YouTube, subscribe to the 11FS channel, and catch up with all the great content that we put out there. Have a great week, everybody. Have a great end of the year. Goodbye.
Goodbye.